Hi guys, Rob here again. Thank you for joining me. Two very quick disclaimers at the start. One, I'm wearing shades because my left eye is extremely bloodshot and I don't want to have to put you guys through that. Number two, this is probably for record collectors and Beatle fans only, but there'll be some interesting facts in there and some drummy stuff as well. So whatever happens, get yourself a glass of water, wine, beer, tea, coffee, orange juice, whatever your thing is, sit down and enjoy. So, Revolver. Why am I fixated with this record? John Lennon was unfortunately shot in December 1980. I went to school that day and we had an assembly and teachers were crying and stuff, and the headmaster played a few records and said this gentleman was shot, he was murdered, and he was quite a big deal in music. Went home that night and everything was Beatle related, including the film Help. They put that on in the evening. They changed all of BBC's viewing that night. So that was interesting, watching Help, because I thought, hey, these guys are copying the Monkees. And of course it was the other way around. And I've been watching the Monkees on Saturday mornings on Swap Shop and loved it. All of a sudden see the Beatles and I'm sort of, and my parents tell me what the fact that the Monkees borrowed from the Beatles, blah, 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 blah. So that was it. I was kind of sold. So in the early days, I was buying all the sort of Beatlemania records. So Please Please Me, With the Beatles, Hard Day's Night, Beatles for Sale, Help. And I don't think I was actually buying them in any order. I mean, I don't know. But I remember buying this album, Revolver, which came out in 1966. Remember the album cover was very different to the other stuff that I'd seen up to that point. And Rubber Soul was the album before this in late 1965. And they were already looking different with their hair and then their clothes and everything. But by the time Revolver came out, they had this image with the glasses, and this is actually my favourite image of the Beatles. Someone said the other day, it was just a friend, said, God, they went through every sort of image, apart from punk and a few, and dreaded hair or something. They went through the bearded thing, the jeans thing, the suit thing, the flowery shirt thing, the flare thing, the Afghan thing, the denim thing. They went through all the different things in their sort of 8 years of being famous. But anyway, this is my favourite. I love it. And of course, it's the one that bands like Oasis, Cast, and all those sort of bands were borrowing from the hair and the look, but also the instrumentation as well. The Casino guitars and the Ludwig drum kit, Rickenbacker and Hofner basses. All those things were kind of being borrowed from this Beatle image as well as the sound, but we'll go into that in a sec. I remember dropping the needle on it, and even though that would have been 81, 82, 83, the songs were just so different. All of a sudden there was a sitar, which I'd never heard before. There was no more woos or I love you kind of thing. The songs were changing, from track one, Taxman, a very bitter song about losing their money to the taxman, to Tomorrow Never Knows, which I couldn't have been more than 14, 15 when I first heard that. And it blew my mind. Not just the drums, but the drone, the reverse tape loops, which I didn't know what they were at that time, and John's voice and what he was singing about. And I remember, if I'm perfectly honest, it didn't really resonate with me. I was a bit like, bits of this album are okay, but it's not really, the sort of happy-go-lucky Beatles that I was sort of used to, and the Monkees style thing of that, and the sort of Heck 100 of bands like that were around in that early 80s period, and that was kind of, Nick Hayward was borrowing from that Beatles sort of like, everything's great, everything's a sunny day, it's brilliant. And all of a sudden this album was kind of like, not everything is sunny, and not everything is good, and not everything is, right with the world. Because obviously 66, Vietnam War, all these things were starting to change, and it was actually reflected in not just the Beatles' music, but other people's music as well. So the album sleeve I just thought was brilliant, like pop art kind of thing, collage-y stuff from Klaus Voormann, who was a close friend of theirs, and a top bass player as well. So that was cool. So, the image of the record I found startlingly different, just very different. And of course the music on it, very briefly, we get Eleanor Rigby, which is track 2, because I said Taxman is track 1, George Harrison song, which famously quotes from Batman, because Batman came out early 66, and that Batman, Batman, and this song goes Taxman. So it was kind of borrowed, as well as George's bitter swipes at the taxman who would take in lots of their money and other rich people's money, rightly so. but yeah, that had a sort of slight connotation, and of course the guitar solo on that as well, because I'd started to get into Deep Purple a little bit at this point as well, through loving the drumming of Ian Pace. And though this obviously isn't as heavy as Deep Purple, but that Paul McCartney's guitar solo on that track is rip-roaring, in the way it came through with the cymbals and everything, you know, just everything's starting to sound tougher. And the microphone, the guys at Abbey Road are learning how to mic up rock bands by now a little bit more. And so the sound's getting tougher, and we can hear the drums clearer, the bass drums there. And Paul McCartney starts using a Rickenbacker bass, you know, which is, for me, it's a little heavier and a heavier tone, not so woolly as the Hofner violin bass. And that, so Eleanor Rigby, track 2. Again, this comes on, and I'd heard Yesterday, of course, on the Help album. But this was completely different. Again, very somber, expecting a nice happy-go-lucky song, and it's not that. Singing about loss and lonely people, and Eleanor Rigby being this fictitious character and stuff. And just very short, sweet, kind of bitter song. It's, yeah, it kind of, for track 2, it was like, okay, so we've gone from like a Batman-style funk thing, boom, 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 bat, boom, bam, boom, which the Jam famously nicked and got sued for as well. But they got that great groove into something which is no drums at all, and it's the string quartet. And then you go into what I always referred to as, you know, what Oasis and Liam Gallagher was kind of ripping, which is quite topical at the moment. I'm Only Sleeping, where John is, we've got that dum boom ga boom boom kind of straight semi-swung feel, singles on the ride cymbal, you know, but hitting it quite heavy, and half open hats and all that kind of thing. Heavy rim shot from Ringo on the backbeat, and that kind of evokes a lot of that early Oasis kind of sound, and well, all of the Oasis sound, you know, on and off at that tempo. And John starting to his voice a bit more when he's singing, you know, which again, Liam Gallagher kind of borrowed from. And I'm Only Sleeping is very lazy song, just about dossing about, probably stoned. And cheeky little bass bits in it and little pushes, just really good. But again, is like not a Beatles song, really. This album's already not proving to be a kind of what we would call a classic Beatles album. And of course, coming off the back of Rubber Soul, which was already getting a bit more somber, it kind of made sense, I suppose. And then you got the sort of Bangra beat track, Love You Too, another George Harrison song. So that's 2 already. He's getting more songs in. That's brilliant, from the sort of opening phrases to when the groove comes in. You've got Ringo on the tambourine, and you've got that lovely reverse guitar coming in on this, what you could call the chorus. And the sort of pauses, you can hang a sign on me, make love all day long. Brilliant. I mean, I love that song. It's one of my favourite Beatles songs, because if you put on a good copy, which we'll talk about in a minute, put on stereo, turn it loud, when that guitar comes in on the make love all day long, you know, it's just, they're starting to experiment using the studio as an instrument. They're fed up of trying to play to the kids, and the kids are screaming and wetting themselves and crying and fainting. You know, they're doing something different. And all of a sudden, this is like a band up on Mount Olympus looking down, you know, sort of with their arms folded, saying, it's our way or the highway, you're following us, or no more whoos for you guys, you know, this is a new thing. So that's amazing. I love that track, really good. After that, I've got my glasses on, but after that is Here, There and Everywhere. Some people always say, oh, Paul writes the sweet songs, but you know, it is an amazing song. And I think Art Garfunkel called it the greatest love song ever written. I don't know about that, but it is a beautiful song. And if you're in love at any point in your life and you listen to it, it kind of resonates. You know, those kind of love songs always do, by whoever. And I think the words are lovely, you know, when he's saying he's hoping that he's always going to be there in her eyes, you know, I'm hoping I'm always there. It's just whimsical and beautiful, a bit romantic, but yeah, lovely song. Great drumming from Ringo, no hi-hats, lovely high tune racked on and playing very, very lightly. Really lovely, and a song that really made, I think, the Beach Boys work hard on God Only Knows, I think, or vice versa. Never get that round the right way. But yeah, Here, There and Everywhere. Yellow Submarine, amazing. People usually take the mick out of it. I think it's a great song. Just thinking of the way it was recorded, you know, going down to them thinking, hey, in the middle 8-bit, let's in the instrumental section, let's just make submarine noises And I think George Martin famously was ill at that time, and they just went nuts with Jeff Emerick, the engineer, and just said, right, we want to get bottles of water, put mics on it, and we're going to hit them, and we're going to blow through things and talk like we're, yes sir, yes sir, as if we're coming through the sort of tannoy on a submarine and stuff. And it really works. And they're blowing bubbles into a tank and recording it and going a bit mad, but it makes for a really interesting listen. And listening to the different takes of it, of how it was originally to how it ended up. I think drugs definitely were involved in some way, but it is a great song, even down to Ringo's, the way the bass drum comes in the town, boom, boom, where I was born, boom, 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 lived a man, da-dum, da-dum, who sailed to sea, dum, dum, and he dum, then we're off. Little thing, but it's almost like a marching band, you know, again, I'm thinking outside the box. And if you think about it, at that time, they'd already done Shea Stadium, the first ever stadium gig. They'd sold more records than anybody. They were famous all over the world. And they were still willing to sort of make tits of themselves in the studio by doing little kid songs. It's kind of amazing, really. It shows that music was important and it wasn't about being cool or the image. It's about just progressing and trying things, which, you know, I try to do with my playing and my listening and stuff. She Said is another song that I think Britpop bands listen to. It's kind of a forerunner for that. I've always said the Kinks are involved in that too. Not necessarily the heavy sound of their guitars, which everyone talks about, but more, you know, the songwriting, the storytelling, which I think Blur kind of took from as well. But yeah, She Said, very bitter song, John Lennon song, about a guy, I'm not going to say who, because famously it might not have been him, but a famous actor he met who wouldn't stop talking and telling him he had done this, he had done that, da, da, da. And John just referred it in the song as a woman saying, you know, you're making me feel like I've never been born, which is the chorus, you know, because you're telling me all this stuff and like, can I get a word in, kind of thing. But the original, and sort of on this version, and the versions we'll talk about in a sec, it's highly compressed. The drums are really compressed, and Ringo plays some great stuff on it. I think I famously quote all the time Questlove saying that it's almost hip hop the way he's playing drums with the fills. Boom, dam, boom, boom, ga, dum, gung, gang, gang, gong, dum, ga, da, boom. It's sort of based around a gung, dum, ga, kind of feel, though it's never stated. And it's one of the things when I'm doing the legendary Drums and Drumming of a Star show that I spend a lot of time on Revolver, because it's got loads of other things, drumming styles and things that he'd never done before, Ringo, but you could easily hear other drummers borrowing from later as well. So She Said always felt to me like it was ultra modern, even back in the 80s when, you know, it wasn't, those sort of bands weren't in again until the 90s, but there was something about it, it was just like, whoa. Side 2, Good Day Sunshine, never one of my favourite songs. I think the chorus is great. It does sound like a filler to a certain degree, and I think Paul came in last minute with it, I think. But yeah, good enough song. But yeah, the verses are a little bit light, I would say. But the chorus, I like that with the double track drums. Dum dum, good day, sun, dum dum, you know, famously overdubbed. Cool. And the second song, And Your Bird Can Sing, we're back up into that Britpop guitar sound. Again, great words from Lennon, and I think it was written about Sinatra, because Sinatra had said some snappy things about them and stuff. So that was his little get back. See what I did there. The drums in most of these mixes are good. You can hear Ringo's rim shot, and he's playing a lot harder. And of course, on this session, they're playing through their amps that they played, I think, at Shea Stadium, the big ones. So the guitar sounds a lot louder than it was before. It's a lot more shrill, distorted, and a bit more attitude-y, shall we say. There's more attitude in it, because they want that big sound, but in the studio. And if you think about it, The Who were coming through about that point, and other bands that had been supporting them, but had, you know, at gigs, but then found their own way. So the guitar sounds killer, and that guitar line, the unison guitar line, is fantastic. Groovy song, again, a forward-thinking song. For No One, which is my girlfriend's favourite, is lovely, famous for that lovely French horn solo. And I love Ringo's sort of almost show-like boom, boom, playing in the background with little rolls and quietly played stuff as he would have heard in music hall when he was growing up, you know, so he could refer back to that. Even as a guy in his early 20s, he could refer and reference stuff that Paul was trying to get across in that song. Famously written about Jane Asher, an argument they'd had, and he was feeling a bit sad about it, blah, blah, blah. Not one of my favourite songs personally, but again, it's one of those you think, already, if you look at the differences in this album, song by song, this is different again to anything that you've seen on side 1 or even on side 2, Good Day Sunshine and Your Bird Can Sing, guitar anthem and kind of lovey-dovey Good Day Sunshine song. And then 3, you've got For No One, this sort of depressed, kind of very angsty kitchen sink drama type song coming in. Totally different again. Then you've got Dr. Robert, which is about their dentist, I think, or dentist, I think, who gave them some hallucinogenics without telling them, which is very naughty. But again, this is another song that references that early sort of new wave jam kind of sound. And again, we could say Cast and all those kind of bands in the 90s. Again, that snare sounds cracking. And on the new mixes where they used AI to pull the drums out, you can hear the drums a lot clearer. But even on these sort of things, this is a 70s pressing, I think, this one, or early 80s, the first one I bought. And the drums are still cutting through and kicking then, really. But it's a good tune. It's got the little, well, you're feeling fine. Again, bit musical in the middle, back into the dum, with the maracas and stuff. It's just mid-60s kind of, this kind of vibe. And it's just cool and tongue-in-cheek. You know, people didn't know on Radio 1 when they were playing it that they were singing about drugs and bits and bobs. And there's loads of that coming in now on these records, where it's all tongue-in-cheek and they're getting away with the stuff. And the posh bods, you know, smoking their pipes at BBC haven't sussed it out yet, you know, so they're sort of doing it through wordplay and so on and so forth. So yeah, another ultra-modern song. I want to tell you, again, borrows from that, you know, Oasis have borrowed that heavy guitar sound and that kind of groove, and George's voice on it always sounds like it's kind of distant somewhere, and it's a bit kind of, well, it's just trippy, which is what it intended to do. And it's got that ding-a-ding-a-ding, that weird sort of discordant piano line, which I think was George Martin's idea, I think. But that's really cool as that comes in halfway through the verses. And the ending, I love the outro. If you know the song, go and check the outro where Paul does the Indian kind of thing with his voice at the very end, and some cool stuff on the bass. And the guitar sound as well on that track is obviously through these big stacks that they had by that point. You know, they were made for that band. They weren't made for Who or anybody. The first box, massive stacks, were made for the Beatles. Yeah, so I want to tell you, just sounds really heavy and hard. I like that. Got to Get You Into My Life, which obviously was famously covered by Earth, Wind and Fire. Love that. The horns on it sound fantastic. And famously, it was played by George originally on the guitar. You know, all those horn lines were played by George. And on the 2022 box set, you can hear those versions. And I wish actually they'd done both. I wish they'd tracked the guitar with the horns. That would have made it sound even bigger. But somebody made the decision to get rid of the guitar, which was a shame. But good sort of swing, boom, ga, boom, ga, boom, kind of thing, tambourine driven. Paul, another great melody, instantly hummable and memorable, just brilliant. Great tune, love that. And Tomorrow Never Knows. Well, what can we say about that? Obviously, they think it's the first rave and trance tune made by not an underground or cult band, but a famous band. Again, I think it would be these days like listening to Coldplay do, I don't know, Blast Beat or something. You know, it was just completely out the blue, but not really, because nearly every song on the album is different and was showing them moving forward. And I think this is, you know, the album where some fans tuned out, you know, and said, oh, nah, not doing that anymore. There's not enough sort of poppy love songs on there anymore. There's none. So I'm moving on to someone else. Herman's Hermits, for instance, you know, were just getting big in the States at that point. And they were like, fine, you go do that. We've done that sort of la la la, pop, pop, pop stuff. We want to go and do something else. And Tomorrow Never Knows, yeah, with the tape loops, which they kind of borrowed. They were into a lot of, you know, electronic music at that point, especially Paul was going to a lot of happenings and sort of early raves, if you like, you know, in London and warehouse parties. Listening to this music, and avant-garde music was starting to be a thing. So he thought he'd bring it into the band. And John was on board with that. The Tibetan Book of the Dead, you know, he's quoting the lyrics from that. And the whole thing of singing through the megaphone for the last verses. So you got that kind of sound, you know, something like that. Is also quite revolutionary and forward-thinking. And again, the drum sound is just hard. It's really, really hard, you know, and really aggressive. And Ringo's so consistent with that rim shot backbeat. And again, it's like early that's the sort of drumming he was doing, you know, at all the gigs to be heard. And now he was getting away with it on the mics at Abbey Road. And on a lot of these tunes, he's playing with more muscle. And I think they'd realised that they could put the microphones further back or whatever, or bring them closer, and he could still play them louder without blowing them up. Things like that, which we're not really going to get into loads of the tech micey stuff today. So, Revolver, yeah, the record itself, just a complete magical mystery tour, if you like, of styles and influences, and no two songs really sound the same. If you can find two that do, let me know. And we talked about the image. I love the image at the time. I mean, if I grab this t-shirt, I love the image of all of them at this point. Love John with those glasses. Yeah, just cool. And I'm kind of obsessed with it because I just think it's the most kind of modern sounding record that instantly sounds fresh when I put it on. I mean, Abbey Road does too, and Sgt. Pepper still glows through the speakers, I know that. But there's something that's just so hip about what Revolver does and the thoughts it provokes, you know. And as I say, the look of the band at that time with the little glasses, the longer hair, the Paperback Writer video with those sort of suits, but they're not matching anymore. Paul's sort of light brown roll neck with a jacket, that look, and these sort of glasses that he was championing at the time, which I think is a pretty cool kind of image. And John's really cool shades. I wish these were them, but I have tried to find them, but they're really hard to find, those shades. And there's Ringo and George as well, bringing up the rear, but they still look cool. You know, some of those shots from, as I say, the Paperback Writer video, when they've got those sort of glasses, square glasses or rectangle glasses, and some are round like John's, just really hip and really cool. I mean, I just love that. The way these two look here is just, you know, it's just how bands were going to look in the 90s pretty much. And I've got another picture which I'll probably share with you from John backstage somewhere, and with the casino guitar, and it just looks like, as I say, a Britpop band without a doubt. And there's Ringo here. Here's another picture of Ringo from that period. Look at that haircut. And those glasses and the famous kit, of course. So yeah, it's not just the image, it's the sound. I just think they projected a lot of stuff from that period. They had no idea they were doing it, but they had, you know, no idea that by 1994, 95, bands would be going full circle and picking up that look, that sound, those instruments, that vibe, and the look and everything, and taking it on to a new bunch of people. And it's bizarre because there's still some Oasis fans that are mates of mine that when I show them pictures of those images next to the Oasis, they still can't see it, but it's a bit weird. But that's all cool, and thank God they're getting back together because music makes people happy. So, you know, all power to people that are going to go and see Oasis and enjoy it. Good luck to you. Okay, so let's look at copies of Revolver and why. So this was my first original 70s copy. Sounds good. It's the one I love. This is the one that I know the most. This is the one I spent the most on. That's quite expensive. I don't need to quote how much that is. But this is a loud mix. Now, very briefly, I can't imagine any modern band having this issue, but there were some copies of Revolver that went out originally that weren't the mix that the band were happy with, so they had to recall them. And it was because the mixes were slightly wrong and the balance. So certain things on this album jump out, and certain tracks go on slightly longer in the fade out. Again, it's an anorak thing. And if you stayed with the video this long, maybe you're interested. Fans know what they're looking for. So when I went to Florence, I was touring with Lorena McKinnett back in 2019. And I had my credit card in my hand. I'd already sussed out this record store. I knew they had it. So I went in and they played it for me. And the guy knew what he was doing. He went to the various tracks with the longer playouts and so on. And he played me the bits. And his English wasn't very good. My Italian's not very good. But we managed to suss out that we were both on the same page with it. Yeah, it was exactly what I wanted to hear. The Taxman solo comes out a lot more. The cowbell on Taxman comes in a weird place, in a weird stereo, or it's in mono, but in a weird place in the mix. The Tomorrow Never Knows mix is different. The reverse guitar and I'm Only Sleeping is slightly different. Love You Too goes out, the play out goes out longer, as does the play out on Got to Get Into My Life. Small anorak things, but when you're a collector, it means a lot. And this can only accrue in value. Yeah, €400. I think it's 5 now, it's probably more. But yeah, well worth having. In mono, sounds brilliant. I used to have Revolver listening parties when I got back with some of my Beatle friend Anorak friends, you know, and they'd be like, well, play it then, let's see what it's all about. And they were like, my God, this is so different. Yeah, cool. This is a copy I picked up the other day when I was at the Beatle Week. I wanted a Capitol version. Famously, Capitol ruined the album by taking some tracks off and putting it on another album, Yesterday and Today, to make more money. But I won't talk about Yesterday and Today. Though that's the one with the famous Butcher cover with them in white lab coats, and they're covered in like a little piece, well, big chunks of meat. Robert Freeman thought it'd be a cool idea if they sat there to get rid of their pop lovely image by sitting there with little baked decapitated baby dolls and lumps of meat, which sounds okay, and the pictures kind of work, but yeah, it was probably a step too far, but they were into it, surprisingly. They're probably stoned at the time. But yeah, anyway, so I picked up this copy, 1966 Capitol. So there's less tracks on these ones than the British version. There's the back, looks the same pretty much, apart from there's a few different things with the record and stuff, and it's Capitol and not Parlophone. As you can see, it's 70 quid, but you know, I'm a collector, can't help it. Also get the inner sleeve that was advertising loads of other stuff. Always like looking at those, at some of the other albums that were coming out. And there's the Capitol label, all good. Plays very nicely, well worth the money. I didn't feel ripped off. It's good. The mixes are nice. There's a few things that are different on that album to the English one again. But yeah, I'm happy with that. Good mix. Abracadabra. Now this was going to be one of the working titles for the record. This is a bootleg, 35 quid, bought it at Beatle Week. And it's got just a few different mixes that when I got home and, you know, because I bought it in like, I just want to buy everything Revolver. At one point I had like 5 albums in my hand, but I had to be cool and go through it slowly and make sure I was getting the right thing. This is in green vinyl, and it's all the tracks that's on the English release, but also got Paperback Writer, the end of side 1, and Rain, the end of side 2. So they've just shoved on the single of the time, which they never did normally, but anyway, it's a bootleg. So you could argue that I've got a few other bootlegs of stuff on CD, which is around. And you could argue, well, you didn't really need to get this, because for things like Taxman, the guitar solos are not on there. It's just rhythm track and George. For No One has got no vocal at all, I don't think. It's just rhythm track, which is interesting. Some other songs as well are heavy on the vocals, and the backing is way back. But as I say, I'm a collector, so I'm not bothered. But, you know, if you're looking to buy it as just a regular Beatle listener, I wouldn't do that. But yeah, interesting to hear these mixes, and Eleanor Rigby's interesting because there's only one vocal, it's not double tracked, and the vocals on it, the strings on it have got reverb, which you don't really hear on the original, but the reverb sounds fantastic on it. So that's that. And of course I've got the box set, the 2022 remastered box set and stuff with all the extra features, blah blah blah, which is another video on that, so I won't go through all that, but that's brilliant. I mean, the AI thing they've done and brought the drums out, and famously, you know, fans online talk about whether the mono's better, the stereo's better, these AI surround, you know, Dolby Atmos mixes are better. I prefer the mono, I'm going to say. I like the mono, the compression in the mono records just sounds more exciting. But, you know, the And Your Bird Can Sing version on the remaster, where the AI has pulled the drums out and everything, the drums sound amazing. And if you put it on A and B it next to a mono version, obviously the drums are cracking, but you can almost hear the spring squeaking, you know, on the AI version, because I think Giles Martin said you could actually do that, which you would never have noticed on other mixes. And there's still some other mixes I want to get. I want to get an 80s or late 70s Apple version of the album, because apparently Got to Get You Into My Life has got louder drums on it. I'll be looking for that as the holy grail, because that one's always kind of shoved in the mix and buried a little bit. Not so much on the 2022 remaster, it's been brought out, but I want to hear, I think it's the Apple 1976 version. So if there's anybody out there that knows, leave some comments, because I've asked some other collectors and they've never got back to me on it. They must think it's a random question to ask. But so there's still some other copies I want to get a Revolver. There's the Odeon label version, blue and red, which is Horseu or something the record company's called, part of Odeon, Horseu or something. I'm looking for copies of that on eBay. So I'm not over yet, and the game isn't over. But if you don't know the album, check it out. See what I mean about the sound and the image, how forward-thinking it was, and how you could liken it to a lot of that 1990s Britpop sound that was going on, and the look of it as well. Quite incredible. So it's my favourite period. Ringo's drumming's great. It's always good to hear Ringo drumming. This, I'll just mention very quickly, a live bootleg that my friend Phil got me from the Budokan in July 1966. And I enjoy listening to this just because they sound great live at this point. They're just loud, a bit trashy. They're not really caring too much. No one's listening anymore. They're on tour. They know they've just made a great record called Revolver, which they'll never be able to play live, most of it anyway. And they're going out and having to play a set list that to them is almost archaic and outdated. But anyway, it's still a nice little keepsake of that last ever tour. And I think this was on my birthday as well, July the 1st, even though I wasn't born in 66. Anyway, there we go. That's my Revolver obsession. I could have done more, but hey, that's it. Check the album out. You might dig it. I know you'll dig it. It's a great record. So thanks for watching. Thanks for staying with me, Beatle fans. And let me know what you think down below in the comments. And I shall see you next time. Take care.